Welcome to Council. Please join me in a karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. He hiaki ana, te atākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. I declare the meeting open. Welcome everyone to today's council meeting. As with last time, we're going to adjourn council after meeting procedures, and Councillor Matthews will open the Long-Term Plan Finance Performance Committee and will resume council after committee. So I don't think we have any apologies. Oh, we do. Councillor Randall. And Pauiwi Liz. Sauce. I move the motion to accept an early departure from Councillor Randall. Deputy Mayor will second. Let's put that to a vote.
It's a hard no from me. So you can go get your rack party endorsement.
And that is passed. No announcements by the Mayor. Are there any conflict of interest declarations? Nope. I move the motion to approve the minutes from the council meeting held on the 13th of February. Deputy Mayor will second. Let's put that to a vote. And that is carried. There's no public participation for council, but we do have public participation for LTP, so I'm going to adjourn council now and vacate the chair for Councillor Matthews.
Can we go? All right. Kia ora koutou. Welcome to the Long-Term Plan Finance Performance Committee, Kōrau, Tōtōpū. The main thing that happens when I take over the chair from Tori is I need to make it higher again. So I won't do a karakia, so we will do that via council meetings. And apologies. So apologies from early departure from Councillor Randall and Pauiwi Kelly, potentially. Hopefully we won't go that long, Liz. So I will move those. Councillor Panovich will second. Oh, sorry. Nicola? That is carried. We will now move on to conflict of interest declarations. Pauiwi Kelly.
There's an item in the LTP that I'll abstain from when you discuss.
Annual plan, I think. But yes,
Right.
Great. All right, thank you. So we'll note that. So we move on to confirmation of minutes, and we'll approve the minutes of our committee meeting from the 13th of February. Councillor Panovich will second. We'll put that to the vote. Ka whakapuakio, kua mana te mōtene. I declare the motion carried. There are no items not on the agenda, so then we move to public participation. I'd like to welcome Chris Kelvey-Freeman to the podium. Kia ora, Chris. You have 5 minutes, including time for questions. We'll just put the timer on for you. No mai.
the opportunity to speak today. Is this going? Can you hear me all right? Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I want to speak about the proposal, the ill-founded proposal to charge commercial rates to short-stay accommodation providers. You know the proposed rules on that, less than 1 month, total availability more than 60 days per annum. Supposedly for a whole property or a rating unit, but according to Monday's post, some confusion as it might apply for a granny flat or even a room within a house. So that needs to be cleared up. Whatever it is, it's not a good idea. It shouldn't go to consultation. Let me tell you why. First, equity. Page 57 of the agenda suggests that most short-term accommodation providers pay residential rates, even though they should pay commercial rates. The argument attributed to Councillor Rogers in yesterday's paper is that short-stay accommodation is a commercial activity. Well, so is long-term accommodation providers. No difference. We're talking about a single house or apartment. What is the difference? The landlord or the proprietor pays his taxes, her taxes, GST if necessary. Councillor Rogers then goes on to say that guests will use council-funded services such as pipes and roads. Well, that's a surprise. I think everyone does that. Long-term renters do that, and everyone pays indirectly through their landlords, so they make a contribution to their rates. Look, we know rating is a blunt instrument. It always will be. Whether it's capital value, land value, as some people are now advocating, or a hybrid system, as I personally favour, there are always going to be examples where people are paying arguably too much or too little. For example, a large house with fewer people in it. But look, an arbitrary distinction between short-term and long-term rent won't resolve the issue. Let's look at the economics of it. We know of stories where landlords rent properties out in dire condition. I'm sympathetic to renters that are forced to take them. We know situations where landlords don't maintain the exterior of their property and they let the interior deteriorate, banking on the fact that once tenants are in, they don't really want to pack up and leave. The key difference with short-term accommodation is that short-term renters continually maintain, enhance and market their properties. That's good for the appearance of the city. Let's look at why people do that. People who offer these things are often active retirees or people who've been bumped out of the workforce for one reason or another, and they are willing to put in the extra effort for a slightly bigger return. Look, if most of them really stopped and thought about how much time they spend on maintenance, repairs, marketing, bookings, administration, they probably would feel that it's really not a thing to bother doing. But they do it anyway, and some proud Wellingtonians actually enjoy meeting and greeting visitors to Wellington. My time's getting on. Tourism, I won't say very much, but look, this is self-evident. You're paying Reader millions of dollars to promote the city, and you're going to take away a major option for people to stay in the city. This is just shooting yourself in the foot. Practicality. Despite a cost of $100,000 per annum, the staff admit that they will not be able to identify a large amount of short-term providers that should pay commercial rates. Councillor Young, we know that that's anti-grammatical, but anyway, does it mean the staff aren't hopeful of capturing a large percentage of the providers? Or maybe they don't know there's a large number of providers at all. What are the numbers? There's no analysis in here at all. 200, 250, 300 across the city. But I can tell you what, there won't be an extra penny come out of this. Most of them will go to ground and evade you, or they will simply stop trading. No one is going to pay 270% extra rates on top of the 20 or 25% that you're levying every year. Just crazy. You won't get a cent more. You'll just upset people. Summary. It's a hiding to nothing. Absolute hiding to nothing. You'll reduce the vitality of the city and the viability of its visitor endeavours. It's a self-defeating proposal that should never go to consultation. I suggest you kick it into the long grass where it belongs and do what Wellingtonians have asked, please. Find some ways of saving money, not trying to get more money from hard-working Wellingtonians. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to call John Swan to the podium. John, you have 5 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
My submission today relates to the proposal to acknowledge the claim of Taranaki Whanui that Matai Kairanga, the Miramar Peninsula, is a tapuna, an ancestor of Taranaki Whanui, and thus they are entitled, amongst other purported and yet to be revealed rights, to create a reserve to be known as Matai Moana on Crown land at the northern end of the peninsula, and are inviting the Wellington City Council to join the future management of the reserve, provided that the council and its ratepayers meet certain conditions outlined in option 1 of the proposal, and that can be found on page 258 and 259 of the draft LTP and 2025 annual plan. I seek the amendment of the LTP that the proposal as detailed should be deleted from the consultation documents to go forward for these reasons. Firstly, there is no basis upon which Taranaki Whanui can claim to have developed a proposal with the Crown to proceed with the creation of the reserve. They do not possess the right or title to enter into an agreement proposed by option 1 of the document that is before you. The land remains in the possession of the Crown. It is administered by LINZ, who are to finally report to the Minister as their recommendation for the future of the land, but not until May of this year. The proposal is premature until the Minister has resolved the future of the land. Secondly, Taranaki Whanui is one of at least 3 iwis who are party to the Kaunihera, the partnership between the council and the local iwi. There is no evidence that Ngāti Toa, Rangatira or Te Ati Awa have been consulted before the resolution was introduced to the annual plan. Indeed, the proposal does not comply with a Cabinet directive made on the 21st of June 2017, detailing the process to establish a reserve by the transfer of the defence land, which is the majority of the land in question, to the Department of Conservation, who must then work with the Wellington City Council to develop a management agreement for the reserve created upon transfer. The Council is to be the governing body. It would receive submissions from its Kaunihera partners and the public and would govern the reserve alone in accord with the intention of government as expressed in a Cabinet minute. To do otherwise is unlawful and would not withstand a judicial review. Finally, 2 of the 3 Eastern Ward councillors have resolved not to stand for re-election. Councillor Brown's intentions are yet to be revealed, and a Maori Ward councillor will need to be elected and the future of Maori wards resolved. There is no evidence of local consultation as to this proposal. There has been a complete indifference displayed by Taranaki Whanui and other iwi to community and university proposals for the reserve delivered in recent years. The Shelley Bay debacle illustrates the difficulty of dealing with iwi in a meaningful way or in reliance upon agreements made in particular on land matters. This resolution is both premature and probably illegal. It is being included without input or knowledge of the local community or the government, which through the Crown owns the land. It has been slipped into the annual process in a devious manner. It is disrespectful to the Crown, it is disrespectful to local iwi, and it is disrespectful to the community contained in the Eastern Ward and Wellington at large. The LTP committee must recognise this and remove the proposal from the annual plan before consultation commences. I'm available for questions.
We have a question for you from Pauiwi Hohaia.
Thank you for your submission. I have an issue with a number of the comments you've made, but I just want to check, are you aware that Taranaki Whanui has statutory acknowledgements over Matai Moana and other properties, and these are referred to as deferred selection properties in their treaty settlement?
No, I'm not aware of that, and I don't think, in fact, it's correct. There was a deliberate.
Oh, well, my tupuna were wrong then.
When the Port Nicholson Block Settlement Trust was settled by the government and accepted by the participating iwi, it was made clear that the defence land would remain in the hands of the Crown for the purpose of a public reserve. Now, that's what I'm aware of, and if you can produce evidence to the contrary, I'm happy to receive it and, if necessary, apologise.
We're out of time. Ngā mihi, Mr. Swan.
Thank you.
I'd now like to welcome Julie Wilson to the podium. Kia ora, Julie. You have 5 minutes, including time for questions, if you'd like to leave any.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. Morning, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'll be reading from my notes as I don't want to forget any points. So my name is Julie and I'm a local Wellington Airbnb host. I'm also the Lower North Island Airbnb host community leader. I rent out 2 bedrooms in a self-contained part of my home, and when I'm not hosting, that space is used by my whānau. I rent it out on Airbnb to help pay my residential rates and help with rising living costs. I want to start by addressing house sharing. The council already promotes resource sharing like carpooling and shared roads with the bike lanes, so why not house sharing? If a family is away for a holiday or on sabbatical or works out of town for a few days a week, why should their home sit empty? House sharing helps residents manage financially and supports Wellington's economy. And let's be clear, we're putting no extra strain on local resources, no more than the intended use of these properties as homes. If hosts are charged commercial rates, many will stop hosting. These spaces will sit empty, or like mine, it will just be incorporated back into my house, and Wellington will lose vital accommodation. The council won't gain the revenue it expects, and the cost to the Wellington economy through visitor loss spending will be far greater. Many guests who stay with us are not tourists. They are workers on infrastructure projects, they are families relocating to Wellington, they're people receiving medical treatment or visiting sick whānau. Many have children, elderly family or pets, and a hotel isn't an option. They need a home, a privacy, a kitchen, in my case, secure parking, or to be in a specific suburb. Airbnb hosts like me are not corporations. We are Wellingtonians, Airbnb to make ends meet. We don't compete with hotels, we serve a different market, and without us, many visitors and workers would have nowhere suitable to stay. Wellington has struggled in recent years with redundancies, people moving away and fewer tourists. Wellington is seen as a Tier 2 destination. We're working hard to help Wellington thrive. Airbnb hosts like myself are ambassadors. We recommend cafes, restaurants, shops. The economic benefits of short-term rentals reach far and wide. The proposal to charge us commercial rates is unfair and misses the point. We're already paying high residential rates, GST, income tax, insurance. The average host in Wellington makes about $10,000 a year, most of which goes back into rates and insurance. We're not getting rich for this, and if you hit us with commercial rates of $25,000 to $30,000, we'll be forced out. And when this happens, many of these homes won't become long-term rentals. They won't be shared. They'll just be put back into our pool, being our homes. If this goal is to slice the rates pie fairly, charging small part-time hosts full commercial rates is not fair, it's excessive. Many of us rent occasionally, not as a full-time business. We shouldn't be treated the same as a hotel with hundreds of rooms. Charging commercial rates for occasional use is overkill. If the council is really in financial strife, hurting small locals trying to make a living is not the way to balance the books, especially when removing or limiting Airbnb will reduce visitor numbers and spending in Wellington, ultimately hurting local businesses' jobs in the wider Wellington economy. Short-term rentals are crucial for events like homegrown, WOW, rugby games and conferences. If this policy goes ahead, visitors won't be able to find places to stay, they'll go elsewhere. Local businesses like cafes, restaurants, hairdressers, supermarkets, transport will suffer. Most Airbnb hosts are local homeowners, not property managers. We rent out homes when we're away, homes that are also used by our families. If commercial rates are applied, these homes will sit empty, further limiting options for visitors, workers and families. A fairer solution would be a small levy per night booked, as seen in Auckland and Queenstown, based on actual use, ensuring proportional contributions. In closing, I ask the Council to reconsider the impact of this proposal. If small hosts are pushed out, Wellington will lose affordable short-term accommodation and local businesses would suffer. We're local, we're not corporate, we're contributing to Wellington's vibrancy and economy. We deserve a practical and balanced approach. This isn't just about rates, it's about fairness, and we just want to keep Wellington open.
We've probably got time for one very quick question from Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. Can you tell me what engagement has the council had with your organisation in terms of this proposal?
Not terribly much that I'm aware of. I'm dealing with it on behalf of hosts because this actually does affect us as all small businesses in Wellington.
But there's been no
Sorry,
engagement.
we're out of time. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank
Thank you, Julie. We appreciate you taking the time. Ken Drayton, no mai. You have 5 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Morena, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I host guests in rooms in my family home, which means I'm spared from the proposed policy based on the consultation document. But I'm here today speaking for those who are. Excluding the CBD and up to the motorway, and including Southern, Lambton and Western wards, there's very little commercial accommodation available between Newtown and Johnsonville, 9 beds to my estimate, with few options in the Northern ward. We fill that gap, and by doing so, we bring revenue to suburban businesses like cafes, supermarkets, etc. Removing our accommodation would impact these businesses and create more crowding in the CBD. There's been a council policy for some time about short-term accommodation providers paying commercial rates. However, there is no information how much these rates would actually be. I'm concerned about a lack of clarity regarding the costs involved. The council website lists 39 commercial rating categories. If the commercial rate is 3.7 times our current residential rates, the increase of rates for under 5 properties would be needed to recover the $100,000 being sought in this document. After that, how much impact will we have on individual commercial ratepayers from the total commercial rates of approximately $380 million? Infinitesimal. Will this be communicated when the plan goes out for consultation so submitters can respond with relevant information? Let's also consider how the new rates compare with traditional accommodation providers. According to the Council's website, if the residential rates for short-term rentals increased by 3.7 times, the cost per person per year for a 2-bedroom residence sleeping 4 would be $7,500 per guest. That's 4 times more than a mid-level hotel where the cost per guest is $1,726. How does this cost create a level playing field? In this case, using Emma's analogy of grapes and bananas changes to bananas and watermelons, with us being the watermelons. There's also the belief that if short-term rentals were removed, we'd have more long-term housing, making housing more affordable. However, research from Intrametrics in 2024 found that short-term rentals have little effect on rental prices or house prices. The population and interest rates have the biggest influence. Also, many of our hosts only rent out their homes part-time when they're away for the weekend, on holidays, or between contracts, so these properties aren't suitable for long-term rentals. Other points to consider. Most of our hosts are mum and dad operators who spend money with Wellington. Large hotels often spend their ground rental and profits elsewhere. The perception that Airbnb is a large international company making a fortune isn't accurate. For example, it would cost me more to run a credit card account for my rental than the commission I pay to Airbnb. With their fee, they also provide marketing, calendar management, payment processing, reviews, plus $1 million insurance and support for both hosts and guests. So if people have problems in a thing, the guests can receive insurance through Airbnb. This is all included in that. Our properties use fewer city resources than long-term rentals, as many are only occupied part-time or are not always full to capacity. They are compliant with the building consents issued by the council. Finally, I'd like to ask for clarification concerning the consultation document. From our meeting last week with the strategy teams, this policy is driven more by perception than reality. Have you considered that many hosts now only offer their space for just 59 days to avoid the commercial rates? How does this help Wellington's economy if fewer visitors can come to the city? Should there be an option in the consultation document to delete the policy, given it has been in place for some time with no noticeable effect and infinitesimal impact if implemented? Page 561 of the document mentions $100,000 in implementation costs. As a long-term ratepayer, I ask, couldn't that money be spent elsewhere? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We do have time for a question from Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, just in your submission, you used the example that hotels would pay less per unit than a bedroom in a house. Had you considered that maybe the hotels had sought more efficient utilisation of land to lower their operating costs and therefore the rates that they would pay, and that perhaps that might be a good incentive for short-term accommodation generally?
So is your preface that you don't want people staying in suburban areas?
Just that it reflects the cost, I guess, is more the question.
I'm not clear on the question, actually, so I can't really respond to it other than that, we are paying rates already. Our house is built for a certain standard. We are doing no more in that house than we were. If my family was home, I would be occupying a lot more.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to come and speak with us. I'd now like to welcome to the podium Emma Reid. No, my Emma, same deal, you have 5 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't introduce myself because I'm going to ask for the video to be played. I am the grapes and banana lady. I don't know how that happened, but there you go. And today I bought a real banana because I can't afford real grapes. Anyway, so I just as an intro, I also wanted to do a plug. I've got these business cards because I've got a lot of local people in that area that I live in Aro Valley, and they wanted to know how they could book for their family visiting or whatever. So that information goes direct to the Airbnb site, as Ken has talked about how that platform works for us. So I'm going to leave some here. And I do suggest that you get in quick, because come June, July next year, that option won't be available for people visiting Wellington. I'll also leave some on the back table. So just quickly, I just want to say that I don't understand why you want to ask Wellingtonians about a policy change that they'll endorse. As Mayor Whānau and the council here have been punched down by our government, I think as Airbnb owners, I'm getting punched down. The comments from the media, that I'm a householder, and it's just not fair, and I'm asking for a fair go. So we know that if this does go to public consultation, more than likely, most Wellingtonians won't understand the long-term impact it's going to have on us as Airbnb hosts, and that option won't be available for visitors. So you'll essentially be wiping out that choice. Look, and I'm very happy because the videos, I didn't realise I only had 5 minutes, but the video is quite long. So you're very welcome to go into the Stuff article, and it has a link to the ending. And this is not my knitting, but I'm really passionate about the service that I provide. And so if you could play the video, thank you.
Yeah, we'll only be able to play some of it, so we'll do that now. Thank you.
Hi, kia ora. I'm Emma, and I run 2 Airbnb cottages in Wellington with 4 bedrooms plus a sleep out. Today I really wanted to thank you very much for this opportunity to speak, and I also wanted to thank particularly councillors Iona and Nicola and Geordie for taking the time to meet with coffee or to answer my emails and queries. I wanted to present today, this is not my forte, but I wanted to come and talk to you because I'm really passionate about my city. As many of us, I love Wellington. I'm a born and bred Wellingtonian, and we have a lot to offer in this greatest little capital in the world. My concern around this suggested policy change is that you're going to lump all of us accommodation providers in Wellington as one. So you're going to be comparing or expecting similar rates between those big guns, the big hotels and the hostels, versus the little people with their few bedrooms. So what I ask is that you don't compare apples with apples, but you consider a more fairer system that will work for everyone. and enable visitors from all around the world who come and live and visit and work in Wellington, like Grandma and her son and daughter-in-law and the little children, so that they can come and enjoy and spend time with their family as they do, or continue to work at the hospital, and also being able to visiting lecturers and having a home away from home and the experience of being in Wellington. Because I know don't only have short-term stays, but I have a lot of people who stay for 1 month to 2 months to 3 months. So please, I do believe in the Kiwi experience and what we can offer here living in the historic part of our city. I understand that we are the little people. Please, we're the little grapes versus the bananas, the big.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. Thank you, Emma, and thank you for the effort put into making your video. We will circulate the link. I'd now like to welcome Joaquina. No, Mai, nice to see you again. And you have 5 minutes today, including time for questions. Welcome.
Are you okay if I take a seat?
Yes.
Is that right with you? Kia ora. It's always interesting coming to these public participations and seeing what's on the agenda, and you'd swear Begonia House was back on the cards with the attendance, but it's Airbnbs today. So, and we learn the world looks different from the different angles we look at, and that just puts into perspective the challenges you have. Kia ora, again, my name is Joaquina Tujuba. I am coming from the Ethnic Communities Advisory Group, as well as the African Communities Council Wellington. Regarding this huge project, I'm coming for more clarity and more questions that I hope that you could push to the officers, as it will allow me to be more educated to help my community understand the changes and how they can actually put their submissions in. I also understand that the officers are coming to the advisory groups tomorrow night, so this should be quite straightforward. Excuse me. Okay, cool. The two factors I'm looking at is on the 130,000 allocation for ethnic communities mentioned on page 139 under key service level changes, community engagement. And depending on time, I also want to talk about the 3 options proposed for investment fund outlined on pages 29 and 37. Again, I'm hoping that you forward these questions to officers when debate begins to seek more clarity. Ethnic communities. The document states we will invest in an ethnic communities forum and establish a new ethnic communities advisory group as a per additional cost of $130,000. However, the Ethnic Community Advisory Group is already established and currently operates a minimal budget of approximately $12,000 per year, which is on average $100 per advisory group member once a month. So the interesting thing that circles back to is this time last year, I was here speaking to you guys about the establishment of the Ethnic Communities Advisory Group and the officer's recommendation to not establish it. So they clearly stated, hey, this is not a good idea on an array of reasons. One of them was the vast range of ethnic communities and what it means, which was something that got my blood boiling. I'm like, we don't choose to be called ethnics. It's your classification. It can't be not fit for perfects now. And the other one, really big point, was financial constraints. Right? They said that we do not have the funds available to establish another Ethnic Communities Advisory Group at $13,000. And I was like, that's the cost of your catering. Like, that's exactly, so it doesn't seem valued. So now you can see my eyebrow raise when we say you got $130,000 allocated to it. And I'm going through the plan as much as I can to understand how this is going to be allocated and how you are wanting people to propose engagements. So my questions to the council and the officers are budget allocation. Is this $130,000 allocated specifically to the Ethnic Communities Advisory Group, or is it shared within the Ethnic Communities Forum? Then what is the Ethnic Communities Forum? Again, I can only go on the details that are printed out there. What does this proposed budget allocation mean for the other 5 advisory groups? Will they receive similar funding increases? Again, you can hopefully see if this one advisory group is getting $130,000, I can imagine the Rainbow Advisory Group, the Youth Advisory Group, and the other ones are going to be like, wait a second. So what is it? What does that look like? Is there also an open and ongoing mahi? There is an ongoing mahi of reimagining the advisory groups model that you guys put into practice with the establishment of the ethnic communities, right? You said, hey, let's look into that. So that's a whole other topic. Are they involved? But what does the budget say including that? There's just not a lot of information. Will the funding cover operational costs, capacity building, or community lead projects? Is it used for hiring pupils within the council to work on these projects? And if it is, why is it allocated under the ethnic communities branch? If it's spread throughout, rename it. Transparency to ethnic communities. So when you guys go say, hey, this was what was used, how are we going to play? I'm going to have no time to talk on the other option. But with the funding, the 3 options, I think the use of investment fund and disaster relief fund are interchanged continuously, and that should be looked at. That's my only comment there. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you, Wakene. There aren't any questions, so appreciate you taking the time.
That's
to come
fine
and
on
speak
me.
with us.
Kia ora.
Now we're going to take a quick break for morning tea, and then we'll come back and start to deal with the substantive business. So we'll take 15. We'll come back at 20 past, so 15 minutes, basically. Sorry, could we please have quiet? Thank you. Item 2.1, water. And no, Margot and Jenny's there to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairperson. Kia ora koutou. It is my pleasure today to present the report to you seeking your agreement to recommend to Council to adopt the water consultation document. You may recall, just a wee recap on a couple of key items, that under the Local Water Done Well reforms, councils are required to submit a water services delivery plan to DIA by the 3rd of September this year. So that water services delivery plan needs to be developed on the final agreed delivery model determined by yourselves. And there's quite a bit of work involved in that. So the timeline that we're working to meet that 3rd of September date is quite tight. As part of the legislation, the Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act, councils are required to consult before making a final decision on the delivery model, and that is the consultation we're talking with you about today. Back in December, before we took a summer holiday, we brought to you a report recommending which options we could take out to public consultation. The decision that was taken at that 11th of December meeting was to consult on 3 options. Just recalling there are 5 options available under Local Water Done Well reform. The 3 options that were agreed to take out to consultation were a Metro Council, establishing a Metro Council water organisation, establishing a Wellington City Council only owned water organisation, and continuing with the current arrangements. Our intent with this consultation is to run it alongside the LTP amendment and annual plan consultation that is due to commence later this week, and that runs through until the 21st of April. The document that has been presented as the papers in which we worked through with you, I think it was last week or the week before, in a workshop, that has been prepared alongside the other Metro Councils and Greater Wellington Regional Council. And the intent of that is because we are talking about 2 options, the Metro Council and the existing arrangements, so they involve the same party. So having consistency with how those options are presented is quite key for our community conversation. The public are able to make submissions on the consultation using our usual mechanisms, so written submissions. They can also choose to submit a video submission. There's also oral hearings. The engagement plan that has been established across each of LTP, Annual Plan and Water, there's a number of drop-ins. There's about 20 that's planned across the community. Hearings are scheduled in May, and that is so that you can use that community feedback to inform your decision making on the final delivery model. And just the last thing to note before we open up to questions is, as you will have seen in my report, the recent Wellington Water cost review reports have been acknowledged, but they have not resulted in any changes to the options we are presenting to the community for consultation. But I would like to reiterate that if a multi-council option is the preferred delivery model, that any Wellington Water financials used to prepare the modelling will be independently verified before we submit a final water services delivery plan to you and before it goes to DIA. Okay. On that point, I will pause there and await questions.
We do have some questions, the first one being from Councillor McNulty.
Thanks, Margot. Given Wellington Water's exceptional operational performance and the lack of regional accountability that's come out of that, there's been a lot of chatter about why wouldn't we bring water in-house as an actual business unit of council where we would have direct control? For the benefit of the public who've not had the joy of hours upon hours of water service delivery plan briefings, are you able to spell out why that option is not recommended?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. So, yes, just for any public who are interested, just to start at the beginning, under the Local Water Done Well reforms, there are 5 options open to councils in terms of choosing a delivery model. One of those options is to have services run as an in-house business unit, absolutely. In October and then in December last year, the 5 options that we brought to yourselves talked about the pros and cons. We also very clearly spelt out that one of the key criteria for the future of our water services is the ability to access more funding, to invest more, to address the need for our community. That meant that really there were only 2 options available under the Local Water Done Well reforms that enabled us to have access to greater borrowing, and that is the establishment of a water organisation or a council-controlled organisation. So that could be either a go-alone option or joining in with at least one other council. So those were the 2 viable options. Based on that criteria that we presented to you, that meant that any option that did not enable us to have access to greater borrowing was immediately taken off the table as a shortlist option for consultation. Does that help answer?
Yeah, it's the key point of it. And just follow up, if councillors do not choose to select a water service delivery plan, what's the government's options come 1 September?
So if council did not submit a water services delivery plan by the 3rd of September, the provision in the current legislation is that government could appoint a water commissioner, facilitator, a water that individual would likely help us through determining very quickly a water delivery model.
I just may final. So, to surmise, Local Water Done Well, the government set the rules. Extra borrowing are the only ones that are on the table for us. And if we don't take one of the options that really is on the table from government, the government's going to appoint someone to do that on our behalf anyway.
That's not a question.
Fair? Sorry. Is that a fair summation?
Councillor Pannett. Could we not use the questions? We've got speeches to come. Councillor Pannett.
Yes, well, as I said to the staff, I'm still recovering from Friday's Wellington Water Committee meeting, so it's an interesting timing.
So question, Councillor.
Sorry, Chair. So, sorry, just from my colleague's last question, I understood that your answer was around a water services plan. It's not about what option we choose, whether the government will intervene. That's my first question.
So, to be able to prepare and submit a water services delivery plan, we must have determined the delivery model. If we don't make that decision to be able to prepare and submit a plan, then I'm going to say commissioner, I may not have that term quite right, the commissioner appointed will determine the delivery model for us,
yeah,
as my understanding.
Anyone's not suggesting not putting in a plan. So can I just confirm, in terms of the cost to customers, which is one of my big issues, we're talking about 0.9% of a difference between a council-owned one and a multi-council. It's 0.9%. So you would, then my question is, would you consider that material?
I think you're drawing staff into debate, Councillor. I think both of these series of questions, I think you're both making your arguments, which I think would be better placed in debate.
So can I just say, in terms of the water services that people would have delivered, is that percentage difference material?
I don't think that's a question I can answer, because I think that depends on each household and what is material to them. If I may, for the purpose of the consultation document and to help our community compare apples with apples as much as possible, what we have done is use the same investment program for each of the multi-council and the go-alone. So that is a large determinant of the charges, and so rather than saying if we went with multi-council, we might do a faster, harder, more aggressive investment plan to fix our infrastructure. If we went alone, we might slow it down because of access to funding. We've not made that determination because that's not our decision to make at this point. So that's why we've used the same investment program.
Can I have one more question, or should I go back on the list?
Question, as long as it's a question, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Can I just confirm that the process to appoint directors will remain a political decision irrespective of the option chosen?
As far as the draft legislation is providing us, and the indication we have through that, then that is what is outlined, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown, I'm assuming you'll use a lot of restraint in your question.
Is it true that the water commissioner would be called the WC? No. The real question is my real question is has the government indicated? Is there any sort of government indication as to preference around the three options that we are putting forward, or are they neutral as to what the people of Wellington decide on?
The advice from the advice that we have been privy to with webinars and so on with DIA is that there would be an appetite for councils to join together because of the efficiencies that should be able to be gained for a community. That is not to say that the government has determined what option councils should take. They have not been specific.
There'll be no need to have debate on this paper because we'll have done it all in questions. Councillor Randall?
Yes. Two of the leading options are to join the regional entity or for Wellington City to go it alone. I just want to be ask you to be very clear with what the demarcation is if we go it alone. Greater Wellington currently provides the bulk water, okay, and it goes into reservoirs for fresh water, and then it comes to us. Who owns the reservoirs? Are they owned by the city council or the regional council?
So in your written question and answer provided, Councillor, what we did talk to is reservoirs. We have included the treatment plants as well as reservoirs, local reservoirs, so there's both. So Greater Wellington own the treatment plants, and then each individual council has some ownership, has ownership of some local reservoirs, like and I can never pronounce it, so please forgive me. Yes, thank you.
So if we had a go-it-alone option, we would have our reservoirs, the new entity for Wellington City would own the reservoirs, and then Greater Wellington, or the new entity, the other entity that supplies the water, would come in and fill our reservoirs with fresh water, and that's the sort of way it would work.
That is one of the differentiators we've articulated in the consultation document, is that would be one of the contractual arrangements we would need to enter into, and we would need to negotiate that with other party or parties as required, so yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Free.
I just want to ask this on the record again. We have very low debt against our water assets at the minute. Where have we got to with discussing that with the region, where we to go into a regional model?
So, as we've articulated in the report, Councillor, what we have agreed at the Mayoral Advisory Oversight Group is a methodology and approach to working through that. We have agreed a provisional number of 750 million, and that's what's been included in the modelling.
Can I ask another one on the record? So I just put this on the record about...
Things are in the record if they're in the papers, Councillor.
Yeah, this one is about the recent revelations that we've been probably charged too much. How does that affect evaluation of our assets? The fact, because it's based on a revaluation, isn't it? It's based on how much it would cost to actually renew them. So how has that affected it, and will that be material for this?
I will answer that, Councillor. So it has impacted on our revaluations, and the 30 June 2024 annual report, in the audit of that report, the auditor actually highlighted an emphasis of matter in their audit opinion, highlighting that our unit rates were higher as an organisation. So that has been known prior to Wellington Water coming out with their two most recent reports. So we've known that that's had an impact on our revaluations.
Councillor Brown.
If people make submissions, or if we can receive a large amount of submissions which are asking that we retain stormwater in-house, is that still a practicable outcome?
It is a practicable consideration. What it would mean, there would be quite a lot of work for us to do. Forgive me, I'm thinking on the fly here. We would need to undo work done to date with the other councils. We would also need to do some pretty quick work to be able to work that up into our water services delivery plan that we submit. So it would put an enormous amount of pressure on the officers to be able to complete that in the timeframes we've got. Bearing in mind we still have a number of decision points to bring to yourselves between the end of consultation in April and September.
Thank you. Get ready for the pressure.
Stop it. Councillor McNulty.
Genuinely a question. What stage would we have discussions around voting rights in the regional model at the moment? Obviously, we have the same voting share as South Wairarapa District Council, so if we wanted to, say, in a new regional model, we wanted that changed, what stage would that discussion occur?
Good question. So working with the other councils, we're already starting to think about timeframe for key decision points such as that. That would need to factor into the final delivery model decision. However, that is very likely, it's very likely we won't be at a point to decide absolute final voting rights in time for the September timeframe that we're working to. However, we will need to have some kind of guidance, some kind of principles. We will need to have something to present to you as part of your decision making. That's unlikely to be the actual split, if you like. As I understand it, that's with the current model we have, that took quite a long time to establish that, and we don't have that at our that luxury at the moment.
So depending on the public feedback of the consultation, if the principle was quite strongly supported that a regional model could proceed, but the public want to know that we have higher voting rights, would we be able to bring some kind of amendment or wording to that effect that we agree in principle to a regional model, but we expect that there be changes in the representation?
I would guess that would be possible. I would need to get advice on that just to make sure that we're not leading you astray. Yeah.
Councillor Pannett.
Thanks, and it is a serious question. At paragraph 64, you say that recent coverage may detract from or colour the conversation about the future. So you're talking about ongoing and consistent communication, but are you going, or how are you going to communicate how this model where we couldn't get our money back will be different from another model which will have less democratic oversight?
I do acknowledge that on the face of it, that the preferred option of a multi-council looks very similar to what we have in place today. However, the legislation has introduced a number of, I'm going to say, insurance policies that make it very different to what we have today. So the regulatory environment, the LGFA funding, the prescriptive nature of the legislation all provide us with an environment that is very different to what we have today. Making that work in practicality will be a challenge. However, I do hope, and I would hope and expect that the collective councils would be able to use what we've learnt in the last few years and in this last couple of weeks to inform how we enter into that partnership and how we shape up the Constitution and the shareholders' agreement.
Councillor Randall.
I first want to follow up on Councillor McNulty's question. Given we have to submit a water services plan in September, which I agree is a very short time frame, are we able to enter such agreement with conditions saying that, you know, for example, that we would go into a regional model conditional on, and then maybe something around governance or whatever? Or do we just have to pick one and that's it?
The plan that we submit, we do have to enact. So whether we could have caveats in there, we would need to explore and have a conversation with DIA. Look, I'm quite sure we could. The reality is that any caveats we put on ourselves and on our partners like that could not work in our favour when it comes to DIA approving the plan, the water services delivery plan. So where possible, I would suggest we don't take that approach and that we aim to get as much clarity as we can heading into that decision point so that what we submit to DIA, we can actually enact with confidence.
Okay. I also understand one of the benefits of the new entity that's different to the current entity is that we are going to have a professional board that will run the new entity. Can you outline what that means and whether any of the board members of Wellington Water would be eligible to go onto the new board?
Could we really not ask questions that want to repeat the paper? I see that there's part of that question, but I don't want to go into the content of the paper again through questions. But the second part, I think, probably wasn't covered.
So there are limitations on who can be appointed to the board of a new entity, whether it's a multi or a go-alone organisation, and that includes elected members, currently elected members, and also council staff. So they cannot be elected. Could existing board members be elected? Appointed, sorry. They may apply, absolutely, but there would be a rigorous recruitment process entered into. And in terms of the legislation requiring professional directors, that's about the extent of the advice we have. That would be the expectation that there are professional directors with commercial oversight and other specific skills to run the organisation.
Pauiwi Kelly.
Oh, thank you. So just expanding a little bit more on that, can you confirm then the letter that we sent as an open letter, that was one of the conditions that we had said, I think, or we were told that the existing board and executive team would not have anything to do with the new entity. So are you saying, because I know in the letter from Mayor Baker that she opposed that, are you saying that that's not what we're doing now?
I don't think that's exactly what the letter said, Pauiwi, but anyway, over to you, Margot, if there's a response.
So what I just articulated there was as per the legislation and the policy advice from DIA. So that does not take into account any particular views and thoughts of whether it's our council or another council. So as I say, that's simply what we have been provided by government.
Oh, okay. I was actually talking about the existing entity, but I'll move on because what I really want to hear, and tell me if this isn't the appropriate place. I could do it offline if it's easier. But could you expand on that 750 million unit you were just talking about? When Councillor Free talked a bit about the low debt that Wellington City actually has right now. Can you just expand, what does that 750 million mean?
I think Andrea is going to answer that for you, Pauiwi.
Thank you. So as Councillor Free noted, we manage our debt as a portfolio, and the amount that is attributable to water is relatively low. So if we're to transfer our assets, our debt and our revenue, we are transferring significantly higher revenues than we would be debt, and so that would have an impact for our debt to revenue ratio in terms of the council as a whole. That has been recognised by the AOG, and so they have agreed to, in principle, they have agreed to a transfer of an equity payment to Wellington to recognise that. That amount has not yet been determined because we're talking about a transfer in a future point in time, and there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before here and now, including the investments that we make. We did some early initial work, and that was based on information that we did with the Department of Internal Affairs some time ago, a couple of years ago, and then updated that subsequently to recognise that 750 million was a proxy. It's not likely to be that amount. We're still yet to work through that and still yet to get agreement from the other councils. But what we've done is we've used that as a clear assumption in our information just as a proxy for that, and of course that will have to be determined in the future.
Very quickly, just a follow-up. Is that a fair?
Oh, look, I don't think it's fair right now. I can't say what is fair right now. I think what is fair needs to be a negotiation between Wellington City Council and all the other regions that are in that, and we need to be doing it based on updated data.
Councillor Free.
So it is quite useful to have some kind of figure. This is the first time I've actually heard a figure.
It's in the paper, Councillor.
Yeah, no, but recently. I've asked this question over some period of time, and this is
$750 million is in the paper.
That's good. What I would really like to clarify is it possible for us to receive that 750 and say put it into our investment fund? Emergency investment fund.
No, because that's not going to be surplus requirements to us, right? This is to reflect that our debt to revenue ratio would be significantly affected by us transferring our assets and our debt and our revenue. So we would need to repay that onto our debt almost immediately.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that brings us to the end of questions. Thank you both. I will now hand over to Mayor Whānau, who's going to move the paper.
Great, thank you. I'm very happy to move this and take that next step to hear from the public. We have quite clearly seen over the last few years, but even in the last few days, that the status quo does not work. And it is time to move toward reform, whatever that looks like, and hear from the public. I'm quite proud of our council for being aggressive in terms of its funding for water in our long-term plan. It is painful on the pocket, but it is what is needed, and it's what our public have asked for. And this new delivery model, whatever the final entity looks like, is part of that whole thing. Look, let's move forward. Let's hear from our people, and let's take quick action, which is what we have been doing, and support this paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Whānau. Deputy Mayor Foon is going to second. Do you wish to speak now?
Yeah, just thank you, Mayor Whānau, for that overview. But I did just actually really want to reach out and thank our staff. This has been a major piece of work that many of the team have been working in a changing environment over the break while we were away. So I just want to acknowledge all the work that's gone into it and will continue to go into it over the 20 drop-ins that we're going to have. I really hope our communities are well informed after this, and will look forward to hearing from them.
Councillor Brown.
I'd just like to actually remind everyone, not that you need reminding, that we're the starting of consultation, and I hope that ultimately when we make our decision on this matter, we take into account the views of the public on this, which is actually going to be our most important decision as a council. Our water rates at the moment are just over $200 million a year, which is about 35% of the total rates for that particular area. We have got major problems with the existing structure. As I see it, the metropolitan water solution is just replicating the existing problems. And in fact, it is also a situation where we've got a very high level of uncertainty about the future liability associated with our water assets, because we do not know the condition of those assets because of the incompetent management of Wellington Water over the last 10 plus years. And so I think that we should be listening very carefully to what the public says in consultation. I will be doing everything possible within my means to encourage the public to make consultation, to participate in the consultation, and to provide feedback that they think that Wellington should keep its water enterprise in-house. I mean, that is to say, in Wellington, and should not do the amalgamation. Further, I also feel that the stormwater should not be in the commercial entity. The idea that we're going to have metered charges for water, which somehow or other is going to be also used to pay for stormwater, is frankly absurd. And there's a great deal of analysis by various parties which shows that. A couple of weeks ago at the IOD, there was a breakfast where a number of water sector experts were specifically asked the question, would you support the idea of stormwater being included with the other two waters, and all three of them, ex-Chief Executive of Watercare, an existing Director of Watercare, the Head of Water New Zealand, and the KPMG Water Sector Expert, all emphatically said that stormwater should be kept out of the enterprise because it is a very different kettle of fish. And the Infrastructure Commission, and I'm not speaking on their behalf, has also released papers to this effect as well. So there are two issues which I will be encouraging the public to have their say on. One is that Wellington should not amalgamate its water activities with other councils, and secondly, that the stormwater should be kept in-house and rates funded and not subject to metered charges. So just to put my cards on the table, that's where I'm going to be running my position over the period of this consultation. And I hope everybody is at least as open-minded as I am about the final decision.
I don't have anybody else on a speaking list. Oh, that wasn't an invitation. Councillor Pannett.
In local government, restructuring is often seen as a silver bullet, and that was certainly a large part of the conversation, particularly on Friday morning, and I literally am still not recovered from that meeting, as we were told emphatically by politicians that we weren't getting our money back and it was too difficult to do, and where I think there was some indication there was, Councillor McNulty through the chair, there was a complete lack of accountability. So we have to be really careful when we talk about structure as being the answer. While I listened carefully to the officers talking about how it would be different, and I think those things are useful, having a strong regulatory regime will help. Let's just remember that this will be the same. It is going to be politicians sitting around deciding who should control our water. And I will be quite blunt that there were very significant issues with that process, particularly in the last couple of rounds of recruitment. I just think we have to depoliticise it. It is a management issue. In saying that, there are also aspects, while we've talked about doing the basics well, we also have to think more carefully about how we deal with stormwater, water resilience and earthquake resilience, and damage to our ecological systems as well. I did ask a question around the difference in cost increases, which I think is very material. I think when you're looking at a 0.9% difference, that needs to be highlighted. Particularly when you look at against the costs, which means a lack of control over our water supply. We wanted to take a course of action, and we were not allowed to because we were held back by the region. There was absolutely no way that the region will agree to us having more power than other partners. That just will not happen. And my last point is I agree with Councillor Brown over stormwater, and just hope that there will be very careful language used, because I keep hearing, oh, well, we're going to have a new entity. We haven't consulted, and that's from a number of people around the region. We haven't consulted. We have not made a decision. And I know we say this all the time, but this time we really have to mean it. We have to listen, because it is such an important decision.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, this is a very important decision, so thank you to Councillor Brown and Councillor Pannett for points made already. I am concerned that there's an element of predetermination going on in our region, that people, as has been pointed out, people think this decision has been made, to the point where we're being asked somewhat untransparently to fund $13 million for some IT improvements on the basis that these will actually be fit for purpose for the new entity, and we haven't yet decided what that new entity looks like. Furthermore, this funding, I feel as a councillor around this council table, I've had no real input into whether this should take place or not, this $13 million entity funding. Apparently a decision made at staff level. There's a complete lack of us being able to influence or steer the current model. And, I have also been quite resentful myself of the slurs and slings that have been cast at Wellington City when we've tried to legitimately find out what's been going on, when we know there have been problems and we've asked for investigations, we've had to pay for them ourselves, and then the results of those independent investigations have just been brushed under the table. I do feel Wellington City still owed a public apology. We have had some private apologies. I feel we're owed a huge public apology from the rest of the region if they actually want us to have confidence and trust in a joined-up model going forward. So no scoping of this IT that's being asked for. We don't know anything really about it, and yet we're being asked to fund $13 million through the bulk water funding. Greater Wellington has said they will consult on it, but it's pretty untransparent in their consultation documents. This is the kind of thing that doesn't give me a lot of confidence. So I do want to hear from the public. Maybe it's just me and I haven't got confidence. Maybe they've got a lot more confidence in a joined-up model than I have currently. But I want to hear from the public what your concerns are, what you would need to see and be reassured by in any joined-up model, or whether in fact the public does prefer Wellington City to go alone. And that way there would be a lot more accountability, I am absolutely certain. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Thank you. I just want to really clarify again, more for the public's benefit, when councillors today are talking about bringing it in-house, we're talking about bringing it in-house as a council-controlled organisation or having it regional as a council-controlled organisation. There is no option in the consultation to bring it home in-house as a business unit, so that's really essential that the public are aware of that. I don't say the government down the road has a huge mandate to do a lot of its things, cancelling ferries and the like, but I think unequivocally on water, that was part of what the change of government were elected to do. Three Waters, even though I think it was the right thing to do, was a huge part of why Labour were out and we have National in. And the direction of that reform that we have to respond to is that local government is out. That's the rules that have been set. That's the direction that the country has been given to the government. So I think it's really important to have that in mind. I want to talk about recency bias. It's a really natural reaction where we let current events dominate our thinking when we make a decision. It's total human nature. But this water decision is a hugely long-term decision. And that's not to discount the absolute failures of Wellington Water and the regional response that we're seeing at the moment, but it shouldn't be only the single only factor that we allow in terms of our consultation or just our own deliberations. The reality is that our water supply would be at the mercy of said regional partners who have shown that complete unwillingness to be accountable if we go alone, and I find that incredibly uncomfortable as well, given the state of the water network. Water is a network. I think that's really important to spell out. The lines that we draw on maps as council boundaries, they're arbitrary. Water operates as a network, and you've had this kind of model at the moment where the water network is managed as a network, but within 6 individual silos. And that's hugely problematic because we know billions of dollars of investments required to just secure a drinkable water supply for our kids. And we are so far in the proverbial poo that we have to be so efficient with how we target our investment in a water network. It needs to be done on network need, not on geographic priority. So that might mean at time Wellington City ratepayers need to subsidise improvements in Upper Hutt to get us the best bang for buck so that the water coming out the tap does not have Campylobacter in it. Other times that might mean that Lower Hutt and Porero's ratepayers are pouring into supply or improvements in the Wellington region. That is the scale of how far we are in the hole financially, but we have to be so smart about our efficiency. And the other way to get our efficiency is that we need a constant pipeline of works to build scale. That's really the only way we're going to get things down, and hopefully from a wide range of contractors through proper commercial procurement practices. So that's where I sit on this at the moment. I'm very open to the public. They need to have their say. This is the most important decision. I think I just want to ask though that councillors, we've heard a lot of fair, valid critique of the current management of our water infrastructure, but it's also just take that recency bias into account and think about what is the best long-term decision for all of Wellington.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. Yes, this is the biggest decision that this council is going to face. And I'm very glad that this debate is flushing the key issues out into the forefront. As we go along, I'm having a crash course in water. And it is hard to understand what it is that makes the big dollars move one way or another. I agree that scale is important, but I don't want scale when it comes to being ripped off or waste. I want scale that is efficient, and we know that that comes through bitter lessons from accountability and having feedback loops when things are going wrong that the new entity will have to listen to. I do thank the officers, though, for all the work they've done and the transparency that has been put out in this document, and we are talking about informing the public properly. I note the audit opinion has a concern about the future estimates that this council has said will happen with the water charges, but I think this is the right thing to do. We need to put a stake in the ground as to what the new entity is going to do in terms of its increased costs going forward. We need to tell our public that water is going to cost more and significantly more, and so they are informed to know that this is a very important decision. To Councillor Pennett's comments about politicians being involved, it's always been a fascination to me when we have these big decisions which should be based on logic being decided in a political environment, and it's sometimes the outcome is political rather than logical. But we are in a political environment. We are politicians who are placed here to make these decisions on behalf of the public, and what we must do, and I think we see that around the table, is to deal with it issue by issue, represent our constituents, and try to get the very best outcome for Wellington City, because that's what we are paid to do. So thanks to everyone, and hopefully we'll have a great engagement over the next 4 weeks.
Whānau, do you wish to say anything? All right, we will go to the vote. All right, so we'll record Councillor Brown's vote against. Maybe check his batteries. I suspect sabotage. All right, that is carried. We will now move on to the adoption of the LTP amendment and annual plan consultation document. Welcome, Baz, Rainer. Is Karen going to come to the table now as well, or you're there? Welcome. No, Mai, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'll keep the introduction pretty brief. So the purpose of today is, of course, to sign out the consultation document so we can consult the community, first through committee and then council. The material in front of you, of course, is known to you. We've been working on it for quite a few months, all the way back to last year. You'll remember in November and December we made big decisions around the capital project, as well as how we're going to deal with the financial challenges. Some big decisions in February in terms of the actual draft CD. There were a few changes made, but in essence that's when the decision was made to go take the consultation document and the LTP amendment to audit. Karen's done her work and she'll report back very shortly. In essence, the audit went very well. Some very minor changes and of course updates to the CD were made in consequence to that, as well as the amendments that were made in February. We're now very much at a stage where we're ready to go out and consult. It starts in 2 days' time. Everything's teed up and ready to go. And you know, I know there's a few amendments floating around. I do want to recognise and make you aware that depending on the nature and scale of those amendments, that could have an impact in terms of when we start consultation. So at the moment we've only got 2 days before we start, but if any substantive changes are made, that could have an impact in terms of when we go out, which will just have a flow-on effect through to adoption in May, June as well. So I'll put that on the table, but I'll hand over to Raina first, and then we'll hear from Karen.
Kia ora koutou. I just wanted to have a bit of a discussion around the short-term accommodation providers. There seems to be a bit of misunderstanding that I'd really like to just clarify where we're at. So obviously we've been doing this rating policy review for the last 2 years plus now, where we've gone through a lot of different topics, and the short-term accommodation providers was one of them. So our current policy states that all short-term accommodation providers under 28 days should be charged commercial rates. That's what our current policy states. We are not enforcing that policy currently because it's very, very difficult to identify the properties that are providing short-term accommodation, and the policy is quite unclear. So the purpose of what we're bringing to you, and including for consultation to the public, is to update the policy to ensure that we are excluding certain properties from being charged that commercial rate. For example, granny flats, single rooms, dual key homes and sleep outs, and to also extend that to 60 plus days or more. So we've made the policy really, really clear in what we're proposing. For consultation, we think it's really important to include the status quo, which is around what question 1 is asking, is whether or not it should include all short-term accommodation providers. Question 2 is then based on what we're proposing in our preferred option, which is updating to have those exceptions and to extend it to 60 plus days. So just a reminder as well that this was agreed on the 13th of Feb for consultation, and as part of consultation you will get hopefully some great feedback from the community around where this should land, but just noting that the current policy is actually a worse off position than what we're proposing essentially for short-term accommodation providers. It will require work, we will need resource, and that's what we've included in the budget and in the committee paper to you, to start being able to identify those properties that should be classed as short-term accommodation providers. That will involve us going onto Airbnb websites, Book a Batch websites, holiday home websites, and trying to identify those properties. It's not going to be an easy task, but we're hoping that we're going to be able to capture some of those. So I just wanted to touch on that before we go through this paper. And also just a reminder that there are other councils that are currently charging commercial rates for short-term accommodation providers. So we have Auckland City, Rotorua Lakes Council, Queenstown and Christchurch City. They are all charging commercial rates on their short-term accommodation providers to varying levels. Happy to take any questions on that.
Madam Chair, can you just clarify to be in the room for this, or do I need to?
I think it's fine for you to be in the room while we're having the questions. It's when we vote on some of the amendments and things like that. Yes, I think that's fine. Raina, I do have a few questions, but I think it might be better if we go to Karen and complete the presentation. So if you have a question about the Airbnb, just make a note so you don't forget it, as I would. We'll go to Karen for her comments, and then we'll take all of the questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to report that we've completed our audit of the long-term plan amendment, and once Council adopts the consultation to long-term plan amendment, I'll be in a position to issue an unmodified audit opinion with a emphasis of matter. So I'd just like to talk about the audit opinion, then the emphasis of matter. So an unmodified audit opinion on the information in the consultation document means that, in our view, the consultation document provides an effective basis for public participation in the council's decision about the proposed amendment. Okay, there are three parts to our opinion. One is that information fairly represents the reasons for and implications of the proposed amendment to the plan. Secondly, it identifies and explains the main issues and choices in relation to the proposed amendment to the plan. And thirdly, and very important, the information and assumptions underlying the information in the consultation document are reasonable. The emphasis of matter, in our opinion, means that we would like to draw to the reader's attention something that is important. In this case, the thing that is important concerns the uncertainty over water service delivery. So the consultation document on the proposed long-term plan includes the fact that council has a preferred option for the water services delivery, and that option's included in the financial information and other supporting and underlying information. The council is consulting separately, obviously, on the water service delivery model. However, its preferred option to transfer those water assets to a new water services entity has been reflected in the supporting information, including the budgets and the plan. We are emphasising this because depending on the outcome of our council and public consultation on the local water done well proposals, the financial impacts on the plan may change. I will leave it there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you all. We'll go to questions. The first one being from Councillor Pannett.
Thanks, Rana, for your reminder around our existing policy. A submitter today came in and just talked about the Infometrics report around Airbnb and the impact on housing, which is, I think, generally what people get worried about with Airbnb. I was just wondering if you could provide an updated view on that, given you heard that this morning.
Look, yeah, there's been a lot of discussions around this over the years, and I know central government have been looking at this as well. I don't have any of that information to hand now, but we can provide that and our thoughts on that at a later point. Yes, yep, and May for deliberations, yes.
Councillor Young.
So this is not a question for Karen, it's a question generally. Just this policy has been on the books for some time. So, I mean, why do we have a policy on the books that we're not implementing?
Essentially, the policy has some objectives around fairness, and at the point the policy was created, it was thought that it was fair to capture short-term accommodation providers as commercial ratepayers, whilst that's not necessarily been easy to find those ratepayers. It's always been the intention that they were rated commercially.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that answers the question, but I'll move on to the next part, which is, how many other policies do we have that are just sitting there dormant?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. For Karen, in terms of the information that's in the long-term plan around the water estimates, do you think that given the uncertainty, some of your concerns could be ameliorated by maybe stating a qualification that these are estimates more clearly and are for the information of the public rather than statements of what's going to happen?
This is an opportunity for questions of the auditor rather than expressing our opinions about what the auditor should do.
That's a question. The question is, would us changing the wording around the fact that these are our estimate, the City Council estimates of a future water entity, would that help ameliorate some of your concerns around the uncertainty?
There's significant uncertainty because you are consulting on the water service delivery model concurrently with alongside the long-term plan amendment. In order for us to be able to issue an unmodified opinion with an emphasis of matter, highlighting the significant uncertainty means that Council has made all the appropriate disclosures in relation to that uncertainty.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Free.
This is a question for Karen. It's now become evident that we've been overcharged, although we don't know by how much, for fixing water and upgrading it and all sorts of things. You've mentioned that you've got an emphasis because it's uncertain about the delivery arrangements, but is there uncertainty in terms of our, because we just actually don't know what our water has been costing in true terms, how has that affected your opinion on our costs and our revaluations and all of that?
Good question. The costs are the costs, so it's we were able to, and the independent valuer was able to verify the costs to invoices and other agreements. So there's no uncertainty there. The uncertainty is to do with the resultant fair value of the assets. The Council, in its underlying forecasting assumptions, have set out the level of uncertainty in relation to that.
And you've obviously been happy enough with how it's been expressed?
Yes, and earlier in the meeting, per the CE, their 2024 annual report also highlights that uncertainty in the audit opinion, and there are paragraphs in the financial statements in relation to that uncertainty and the proposal around that.
So another concern is that the Wellington Water annual report from last year hasn't yet had an audit opinion. This came out because the submitter actually asked why it wasn't on the website, and it turns out they haven't yet received it. So their reports from 2023-24 have not yet been audited. Does that have an impact?
Can I answer this question? Because I don't think it's fair on this question being asked to Karen, because she's not the auditor of Wellington Water.
Okay.
So as CFOs, a group of CFOs, and of course myself as acting chief executive, we have sought some assurances around that from Wellington Water. We understand exactly where the process of Wellington Water's audit is at. The information around the financials is not of concern. There is some information on the non-financial information that the auditor was still working through, and they've committed to completing that towards the end of this month. But Wellington Water are still working with them proactively on that. There's been delays on both sides, both the audit and Wellington Water's side, and there's a lot of work going to finalise those reports. Perhaps what Karen could comment on is how she was able to sign off on the annual report for 30 June 2024, because as I understand it, she was able to get sufficient assurance at that time from Wellington Water's auditor to be able to clear our annual report at that time.
I would be very grateful to hear that from Karen. Thank you.
As part of the audit of Wellington City's annual report, we asked the Wellington Water auditor to provide us with assurance over certain material performance measures. They were able to do that. So my understanding is that the reason for the 23-24 Wellington Water annual report not being signed relates to non-financial information, but not those performance measures that they reported for Wellington City Council's annual report.
Thank you. That is reassuring. I don't completely understand how it all works together, but I'm reassured that you're reassured.
I think you could take some of your questions offline to Andrea and Miriam. Yeah, great. All right, Councillor Calvert.
change of pace, just back to the short-term accommodation. What's other than sort of trying to rectify something in our rating policy, what analysis has been done by council on these proposed changes?
What can you clarify what you mean?
Well, I'm just trying to understand. I know you referenced other councils, but other councils, sometimes their rating differential is different. So I'm really looking at sort of the economic impacts, the consequences of making the policy change, and then also whether the policy change will deliver what we're hoping for. So basically, just like any other, when we make a policy change, we do analysis and we engage with the industry or whoever's impacted to start with before we determine a position.
I just want to emphasise that the reason that this policy, that this decision is before us is because of decisions of this council. So I just want to get that on the table first. That is the reason that the work happened and the reason that the options are being presented in the consultation document. But Rainer, if there's anything.
Yeah. We have done work, but it is also hard at this point when we do not understand the magnitude of how many ratepayers will be impacted. That work needs to be done, and I guess, the decision that came to you on the 13th of Feb was for inclusion in the consultation document and for funding for a resource to do that work. So we don't yet understand how many potential ratepayers would be affected. And that is something that we can continue to do work on, noting that this would not be in effect essentially until the 1st of July 2026. So whilst the policy will be updated, it will take time for us to identify those properties as well.
So would it not be better for us just to agree to do the analysis first up before we make a change? Could we, because I'm assuming it's 100K in the budget, so could we just not do that analysis first before we go out to consultation?
I just want to come back to the point that the reason that this decision is because of decisions made by this council to do this.
I appreciate that, but the other thing is I think we've a lot more aware of some of the intricacies and some of the and also the inconsistencies in terms of what we're doing and how we're going about it. That's all.
Can I just make a comment? I don't think there's inconsistencies in the way that we're doing things, but I don't think it would be all that prudent for us to be doing a whole lot of work that requires $100,000 in cost if this is not going to be pursued by the council. So we're trying to implement a policy here. We're trying to, first of all, clarify the policy because the implementation of it is not clear, number one. So we're trying to be very clear on that, as explained by Rainer. And secondly, if that's the policy decision that this council wants us to follow, then we can start to implement it in earnest and with very clear direction. And so that's what we're trying to achieve through going out through this consultation.
Look, I could ask a lot more questions, but I'll save it for debate.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, I just want to actually get clarification in respect of one point about the 6 months delay to past the legal time for the Wellington Water audit. You're saying it's not about financial matters, so it isn't about operational matters such as the audit of whether their contracting regime is actually efficient. I mean, what is the bit of the audit that hasn't been completed?
So I can answer that through the information that I've been provided, Councillor. So the information is around the non-financial performance measures. So that's not about the contract management that would be included in the finances and the financial part of the audit. So it's about certain measures that are presented in the non-financial around, I don't have them directly to hand, but they are about whether or not there are got the right systems to be able to audit those or not. So there's been questions that have been raised in terms of by the auditor, and so Wellington Water have been collecting that information on those non-financial performance measures. That has been delayed, but it's not to do with contract management. It's just about ensuring that there's good underlying information that can be picked up and used, or alternative information to substantiate.
I think I understand what you're saying, but then why wasn't that actually picked up in earlier years, given that presumably those systems were the same?
So, yeah, very good question. So an auditor will look at different performance measures in any given year, and that will be done based on audit risk or areas of audit focus. They could also have been new measures that are put in, or their systems may have changed throughout the year. So there's many different ways in which this can occur, and that we've even had it occur for us in the past. So, yeah.
I just want to check if there is anybody that hasn't asked a question yet. Otherwise, I'm going back into second. All right, Councillor Pannett. Oh no, actually, Councillor McNulty, I don't think you've asked a question yet. I'll go to you.
Just a quick one. Can we just have officers confirm the matters raised by Wakina in his public participation this morning are going to be attended to and addressed?
Yeah, we'll take it offline and we'll have a chat with him. Yep.
Councillor Pannett.
Chair, I'm taking on board your comments. So this is just me trying to understand something because I've had a constituent come to me. So with the short-term accommodation, if it does then become 3.7 times more in terms of the rates, is it your understanding then that operators would most likely have to increase their rates for their guests?
I think that would be a decision that those entities would need to make themselves, those organisations would need to make themselves. I mean, that, as Ryan said, this is not a new policy, this is just enacting the policy that hadn't been put into action and enforced. And so those decisions are decisions for individuals to make. Yeah.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. What is the funding impact estimated from applying this rate? Are we going to make a lot more money, or?
No, there's no increase in the revenue that the council will make. It will just reduce the amount that other commercial ratepayers pay. So it's around how that pie is split, not how big that pie is.
Okay. So, just to be clear, so you expect to have more rates income from these hosts than you're currently getting from residential rates?
No, so if we need to collect $100 million in rates, that's how much we'll be collecting regardless of the change or the update to this policy. It will just be that a portion of that will become from an increase from short-term accommodation providers, and that will reduce the portion that other commercial ratepayers have to pay.
Okay. Have you done any work on the economic impact of having these?
This has been asked and answered, I think.
No. So I'm asking, have you done any economic impact on Wellington City from the potential exit, as we've heard from submitters?
I think that has been asked and answered. That was Councillor Calvert's question.
Oh, was it? Sorry.
Yeah.
One last question. Will this be applied to Airbnbs that are on Maori land, which are currently not rated?
Are there any?
No.
No. There isn't any on Māori land, and I mean, with any rating policy, when people are charged certain rates, if there are any circumstances that are unique or particular to that particular property, we always encourage them to come and speak to us and to discuss those circumstances directly with us. We have an incredibly permissive working relationship with our ratepayers to try and work with them to determine how the policy applies to them, how we can work with them to make sure that the payment plans that they want set up are appropriate, and so we would be happy to sit down with with any unique circumstances and work through those. That includes people that could be uncertain around if they've got a granny flat or whether or not that situation applies. We would be sitting down and working with those homeowners to make sure that we're applying the correct policy.
Councillor Young.
Thank you. So you mentioned some of the regional authorities that have already done this. Are there any regional authorities that have investigated it and decided not to do it?
No, not that I'm aware of.
I think you should look at New Plymouth.
We can do that.
All right, that has brought us to the end of questions. Thank you all. Much appreciated. All right, so we are now going to go again to Mea Whānau to move the paper.
Very happy to move this paper. Mainly just a huge thanks to staff for all the work that they've put into this. It's been a very lengthy but robust process, and really, really proud of the work that you've put into this. Also appreciate the clarification around accommodation. It sounds to me that it could work for those that are worried about the outcomes. In fact, perhaps better than other councils. So the best thing now is to hear from our people. So really excited for this to go to consultation.
Councillor Panovich is going to second. Do you wish to speak now?
Yeah, will do. Yeah, we're back again looking at a consultation document to go out to the public. I don't see any need to change it. We've discussed this multiple times over multiple months, over multiple years. The accommodation scenario, which has again come up in the last couple of days, has been discussed ad nauseum. It is in our policy. What we were trying to do as a proponent of the scheme was to ensure fairness and equity through the rating base. Unfortunately, we couldn't actually add to our rating base via this policy, so we've looked at it from this perspective. I understand the rating differential may not be quite the best way, and it's an unintended consequence of the work that we've done, but at least let's put it out to consultation, because then we can find other options which we can work on. So overall, very happy with the consultation document, which sits about 12% rates increase for the following year, looking at the annual plan, which includes, again, our sludge levy, which people tend to forget about, but we will be visiting very soon, so that'll be exciting. Thank you.
All right, so we'll now go to Councillor Covert for your amendment.
Do you want to put it up on the screen? Okay. Right. Two wrongs don't make a right. If our policy is not working, it doesn't mean that we should then insert another policy that we don't even know if it's going to work or not. There's been no real policy analysis done. There's been no real comparison with what's being charged around the rest of the country. And I'll give you an example. When we talk about charging commercial rates, Auckland is 2.6 times the general rate. Hamilton is 1.5%. Christchurch is 1.697%. Oh, sorry, no, in terms of the ratio. Auckland has a graduated scheme. You don't pay full commercial rates until you have over 180 days in offering in short-term accommodation. This council prides itself on being able to, when it goes out for consultation, there's the work done behind the scenes. When we understand the implications, we understand potentially unattended consequences. So when we go out for consultation, it's pretty much a fait accompli. But having said that, and it does involve some various aspects. We had the similar situation with encroachment fees. We didn't get it right, and we caused a lot of angst amongst Wellingtonians, and we had to back down quite a bit. We did the same with the half-cost paths policy. Again, we hadn't done the proper analysis up front, didn't understand the scope and the scale of the issue. And we've done exactly the same with charging for motorcycle parking. So really what this is about is saying we need more information. We shouldn't go out for consultation. It's not going to impact the budget per se. It might just move the deck chairs around a bit, but it's not going to impact on the budget. And we should do the analysis like we do for any other policy change, not just reach the solution to start with and then try and get the wording to fit. I understand there are some other, there's a foreshadowed amendment, but my advice is that, it's really just it's just a mess at the moment, and going out with the public when we haven't got enough information to back up our proposal is not going to help. So I do ask you for your support for this, and I know there might be some questions of officers beforehand, and I suggest that they're asked first before the motion gets seconded by Councillor Young.
Yeah, I'll chair the meeting, thanks. So can we get, I have some questions of officers, and I'm sure some other people do. So my question is about, firstly, what engagement has already happened with providers of short-term accommodation as part of this process? And my second question is, I just want to touch base regarding the comments that Baz made about significant changes and whether or not this, how the impact of this would have on the engagement process and the ability to kind of deliver the consultation documents, etc.
So, in terms of changes to the consultation document, they're quite rare to do after we've gone to audit at this stage, particularly since we're consulting in 2 days' time. Anything that has a financial change that requires us to rerun the budget would require us to delay consultation. And of course, anything that require a re-audit would significantly affect the timeframes. Small editorial changes or lifting little sections out can be achieved. It may, because everything's waiting at the printers right now, so I'd have to check with the team. The reality is I can't give you a definitive answer. If I can't get everything printed in time, then I may just have to start on the 20th. Everything would be electronic, and I might have to extend the closing consultation period to ensure we meet our statutory requirements.
And then just on the first question, we have spoken to Airbnb through the course of this policy review. I guess the consultation process and getting the feedback from the community is our consultation with them. So we haven't had a lot of specific conversations with each Airbnb owner. This is the process to get that feedback.
Councillor McNulty, did you have a question about the amendment? Okay, all right. Councillor Calvert, do you have a question about your own amendment?
Yes. So in terms of, if you look at the annual plan budget, we've got 100,000 set aside for this work. Is that something material on a sort of roughly 950 million OPEX budget for the year?
No, that would not be material. Okay. It would require changes, though, to our consultation document, and the removal of that and update to the submission forms and things like that would cause delays because it's already gone to print.
Okay, and so when you also said that you talked with the Airbnb in New Zealand, did you talk to any other groupings like Book a Batch or anything like that?
No, I don't believe so.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Wineta.
I have one to the chair. I have big thoughts about Airbnbs and short-term rentals in general. I'm just wondering where you would prefer me to voice them, in response to an amendment or as part of the substantive?
I think this could be an opportunity to discuss that particular matter, though you have the opportunity later as part of general debate, and you can speak twice even. All right, so we now move on. Councillor Young, you're going to second this. Do you wish to speak now?
Yeah, yes, just briefly. I am very concerned about this. I feel it is will be the curtain-twitching proposal from this council. I don't know how we're going to, I live in an area which has a lot of Airbnbs in it, and it will be very hard to work out which ones are Airbnbs. But it's great that the council is managing to unite Wellington against us with a proposal like this. I really am deeply concerned about the idea of council really ratifying neighbours spying on each other. It'd be like the worst of Eastern Europe after the fall of before the fall of the Berlin Wall. I think we should think, if we want to do something like this, of a flat visitor tax, which would apply across the board. I think that would be easier to implement and not have all the almost impossible investigation that this will require. But I think we are punishing people, many of whom are, interesting at my local anecdotal knowledge, a lot of the Airbnbs are run by single women who are doing it to help pay their rates and mortgages, because sometimes they find it harder to get back into the workforce when they're a little bit older. That's a good stand for council. But I think we are punishing people who are trying to cover the costs, and I also think we need Airbnb for tourism, and this will turn off Airbnb overnight and be very damaging for the city, so I'm very pleased to second this amendment.
I'll speak now, just very briefly, to say that this proposal has been, discussed for some years now, and there has been kind of multiple opportunities to change the option, which this council hasn't done. And actually, we have voted to continue to look at taking such a measure to try and ensure greater fairness and equity across our commercial rating base, and to exclude some providers where it may not be appropriate to enforce the current policy, which is to charge commercial rates. I'm not sure, interesting the where Councillor Young's mind goes, because there's nothing in the paper or the proposal about curtain twitching or neighbours spying on each other, and I certainly hope they do not do that. In fact, what is going to happen is we're going to resource our internal officers to do some investigation to try and identify where these properties exist. I guess I just want to note that what we are doing today is deciding on a document to go out to public consultation. And who we have heard from is Airbnb providers. I am interested in hearing the views of the rest of the community about how they feel commercial rates should be distributed across that rating base. And I mean, many of the providers that we have heard from actually would not be affected, and in fact would be positively affected by this review. So I do think I want to hear from the public, and so I will be voting against these amendments. And I think that we have, this conversation has been, the other thing is about the destruction of the Airbnb providers, which has kind of been said that this will be the end of this in Wellington. Other councils do this, and as far as I'm aware, you can book an Airbnb in Auckland, in Queenstown, in Rotorua, and these places. There may be some shifts in the market as a result of this policy. However, it does not represent the death knell of Airbnb. Airbnb is a useful part of our accommodation market. However, where the income is generated, it should be fairly rated. Councillor McNulty, did you wish to speak on this amendment?
Nothing to say, just foreshadowing an amendment.
Councillor Rogers?
Yeah, just for the pleasure of the table, I thought I might actually speak to what would happen if this amendment were to pass, because it seems like neither the mover or the seconder actually understand what would happen. If you remove all of the consulted options on the changes to the rating policy, in effect what you would be doing is solidifying the status quo. The status quo applies the commercial differential to all short-term accommodation providers, which would be broader than the preferred option in the consultation document. So I would suggest to the mover and the seconder that if their intention is to have less rates applied to Airbnbs, this is not the way to go about it, because instead what you're doing here is embedding a far broader and more expensive burden on ratepayers by going out to consultation. That's completely your own mind. Perhaps you spent too much time reading about the Berlin Wall and not your papers.
Councillor Brown.
I'm totally opposed to the 3.8 times rating differential on commercial properties. I think it is a massive problem for the commercial sector of Wellington, especially the small business sector. And interestingly enough, I think Councillor Calvert and I go to the same hairdresser, and I know that a lot of small businesses, including my hairdresser, suffer a lot from 3.8 times, plus all the various add-ons. But the critical thing that we've got to do is ensure that the rates are done fairly. And if some people are running commercial activities on their properties and not getting commercial rates, that is unfair. And I think what we're basically saying with the original proposition is that we will actually try and look at the fair apportionment of rates across commercial properties, even if the 3.8 times is usurious. And I think that Councillor Calvert's amendment is not in the spirit of the intention to actually arrive at a better and fairer rating outcome.
Councillor Winera.
Okay, I'm gonna speak to everything now, but specifically this amendment, because I don't want to speak 3 times today. But in general, I'm satisfied with the consultation document. I'd like now to speak to a single item in this document, and the one that is in question by this amendment, which is to say the short-term rental providers question in number 11. So the economist Lindbeck once said that the fastest way to destroy a city short of bombing it was to implement rent controls. Now, he was Swedish and right-wing, so I'll go one better and maybe introduce a faster way, which is welcoming unregulated short-term rental operators to your city. I reckon that is the absolute fastest way. There are dozens of fairly grand old cities that agree with me as well. I've got a list here. There's Rome, there's Paris, there's Vienna, New York, London, Berlin, Sydney, Singapore, many others. All of which have been bombed and rebuilt. But all of these have taken measures either equivalent to or stricter than our existing policy or the improvements that are proposed in the paper today. In fact, I think that is a point that, despite the very good explanation of our officers, requires yet another explanation. Our current policy requires some operators who rent for more than a month to pay commercial rates for their operation. That is the current policy. All that the paper before us proposes is simply to clarify and enforce this existing policy. I must confess to being somewhat seduced by Comrade Calvi Freeman's suggestion to rate all landlords at commercial rates, but I will settle for this small blow against the rentier bourgeoisie for the time being. The measures that are proposed in this paper are well supported not only by international but also by local evidence. So MHUD's Homelessness Action Plan from 20 to 23 states that unmanaged demand for short-term rentals has pushed up house prices and rents in all of New Zealand's urban centres where it is a major player, exacerbating housing precarity experienced by citizens in those areas. Queenstown, for example, has been locked in mortal combat with the short-term rental industry for almost a decade and has seen a mass exodus of locals who are unable to find long-term rentals because of the presence of this short-term market. So finally, I'd just like to refute the notion that I think this amendment is kind of operating under, which is that all or even most STR operators are like small-time, non-commercial, community service-minded operations uninterested in substantial financial gain. And to do that, I'll illustrate the point with saying that until very recently, a certain corporation that starts with A and ends with Airbnb hosted a testimonial on its website which gloated that an operator was making, quote, $19,000 a year by charging just $140 a night, all without paying commercial rates. The corporation itself explicitly promotes circumventing city policy, which we ought to be enforcing as an attractive incentive to using its service. I find that unbelievable, and I find that testimonial alone totally refutes the basis for this amendment and affirms the approach which is being proposed in the paper that we have before us today. So in conclusion, I think we have a good policy already, and the paper today makes it better because we are going to be clarifying it and enforcing it. That is all. I think you should vote against this amendment.
Just to clarify the process from now on, so if Councillor Calvert's amendment passes, Councillor McNulty does not put his amendment. If it fails, then we will go to Councillor McNulty's amendment and we will have an opportunity, I think, then to ask questions of officers as well. Councillor Pannett, do you wish to speak? Yeah.
I wasn't going to until I heard Councillor Winera's speech. Just really briefly, I do think this issue is a little bit complex because I would accept if you are running a business, it is a commercial operation. It will, to run a good city to stay in, you do need decent infrastructure. However, as a group of people who are on 6-figure salary, We are a relatively still privileged minority, even in well-paid Wellington. Like, there are people out there who are just trying to cover their costs. Like, $140 a night minus all your expenses is not going to make you rich. It's just going to pay the bills. And I think really what some of our colleagues are objecting to really is the enforcement action, which will change things around. So, look, a little bit tricky for me. Definitely want to hear the consultation. In a time of high unemployment or relatively high unemployment in Wellington, I can see the attraction of this. And to some of our colleagues who do not yet own property but will, you will. I know you feel you won't, but you will, or you'll inherit it. You know, there are costs. Kia ora.
Might be best if we didn't go into other colleagues' financial situations. Just saying. Councillor Calvert, your right of reply.
Thank you. Councillor Pennant, I agree. It is a complex matter. There's lots of elements to this, and so a couple of paragraphs in a consultation document does not provide Wellingtonians with the ability to be able to have an informed say in what should be happening. I'm not going to go back onto heritage or what happens overseas, because I'm already concerned about the current circumstances now and Wellington's place in this country. And if you think about our city, we have imaginary boundaries between us and Poirua and Hutt City. Are we going to be driving business out there instead of here? I don't know. But this is sort of, there could be an unintended consequences, and if we actually had done some analysis before going out to consultation, we might have those, might have that answer. It's the onus is on us when we go out to for consultation to make sure that we have a clear set of facts, and we don't have that at this stage. And yes, Councillor Brown, yes, we do share the same hairdresser. I think I have a better job done to mine than yours.
Keep it clean, colleagues. Anyway, maybe it's because I make sure I'm clear about what I need to have happen in the first place. But anyway, it's about setting good policy, and just because our current policy is not working, we're going to go ahead and tweak it, and we still don't know if it's going to work. We still don't know who's involved. We still don't know if we can even identify the people. So yes, we might get a few people coming back to us, but the analysis really just needs to be done first before we go out with a fully formed proposal and understand where the impact is, because I'm not going to get into a taxation discussion here, but I just want to point out that the government introduced GST on some Airbnb rentals, but then it depended on how much you were earning. There's a flat rate, there's not, and I just don't think we've taken into account all the impacts, because there could well be some double dipping on top of our local Airbnb providers. So we just do not have that information at this stage. So until we have that, I don't believe that we should be going out for consultation. I believe we need a fair rating system, and as you know, Councillor Brown said, 3.7 times for commercial rates is far too high, especially when you compare it to the likes of Auckland, Christchurch and Hamilton. Thank you. We will now go to the vote. We can take them separately. So the 3 and 3.1? Oh, sorry. Well, it's that sort of bit of 3. Yes, so we'll do the first bit, and then we'll do the 3.1 bit, and then the 6 bit. 3 and 3.1. Yeah, that little bit of 3. No, No, I checked, Terry. That is lost. And then we will go to 6. Councillor Abdurrahman. That is also lost. All right, so then we will move to Councillor McNulty's amendment. Got the new words that you sent through on email?
Yeah, and I may be happy to take an adjournment and make some tweaks based on what comes out of Q&A. Depending on what the mood and meeting is. Look, firstly, apologise for the lateness on this. It was really only through sending an email last night I thought actually this might be worth a stab on it. But if that's grounds for someone to no longer consider the amendment, all good. Really, all I'm trying to do here is just save ourselves from some grief throughout the consultation process and the public submission process. I appreciate the clarification of our short-term provider accommodation settings, but clearly that's a policy that doesn't work and is difficult to enforce. So the central premise of this amendment is let's agree in consultation to revoke the existing policy and only ask, should we implement the policy that has exemptions for partial units? So if someone has a sleep out or a bedroom, that they would not be commercially rated. Because I'm reading the room here that we probably do not want to get into the quandary of saying, well, that bedroom is 5 square metres of your 95 square metre home, ergo you should be paying a 4% commercial rates differential. I'm pretty confident no one in the table wants us to start getting into that quandary. And I just have a... Sorry, there was a few conversations. So the central premise is that when we put stuff out to consult that's unlikely to pass, it doesn't reflect well on us. I think back to when we did pools and libraries around some of those closures. It was a real learning moment here at this table where none of us ever intended to pass that amendment, those changes through that would see us doing those closures. And we just annoyed so many people. We had hundreds of emails and we caused a lot of angst. And again, the City to Sea Bridge, even though I think we've made the good outcome, the fact that we did a consultation in which the second outcome was a bridge that none of us ever intended to put through. Again, I just don't think those are the types of consultation changes that we should be doing that are conducive to good governance. So yeah, making the assumption around here, we don't want to get into that quagmire of partially rating units on, proportion of floor spaces. But, I could be wrong there, and if so, vote down the amendment if we want to go into that. So the amendment is just to try and make crystal clear the proposal we're taking to the public, because already there's a lot of confusion about individual units versus full units. We've had that clarification come through now, but is it strongly support or strongly oppose that we should only do commercial rates on Airbnbs where it's an entire unit? And I guess, for the proponents of this, given Airbnb have deployed their corporate lobbyists, we should not have scope for ambiguity on this one, because they'll use ambiguity and, their lobbyists are already sending emails around to councillors here. It's the first time I've seen that. It's quite interesting as a councillor. So please, let's just not annoy another community with changes that we don't intend to pass. There's enough thorny issues in this amended long-term plan / annual plan. This is really just try to do a common sense scope change of this is what we want to consult on and make it clear, and then people can have their say. If that's not the case, that's fine, but I think it's worth punting this up and just having that consideration. So go to questions, and like I said, could be happy to make changes if there's unintended consequences from how I've worded some 3.1 particularly.
All right, we'll move to questions. I have a few. The first is whether this understanding orders and practice is an appropriate way to revoke a policy, given a policy would have been adopted with a consultation process. For us to revoke a policy without any consultation is my question. I would normally think that there would be a greater process attached to a revocation.
Yeah, look, we're struggling a little bit to understand the intention of what this amendment is doing. However, if we are revoking an existing policy, we would still have to consult on revoking that policy because it is a change to the policy. Yep.
My other question is about, I suspect that this move may be open to legal challenge, and I guess I'm just nervous about doing something in the process that may increase our legal risk by removing or changing the options at this point.
So my advice at this point, given we just have not had time to consider this in full, is that we should continue with the options that were identified. That is the safest approach from a legal perspective. We may be able to provide more nuanced advice if we'd had more time, but there is just simply not enough time to provide a real assessment of the legal risk here. So therefore, my advice would be to continue with the appropriate options or the reasonably practical options as per standard policy, and given that this represents a status quo in our current policy as well.
Okay, Councillor Rogers?
Yeah, this was a question I had of the mover, but I guess it might also be for staff's interpretation of 3.1. I was just wondering, in that sense, would short-term accommodation policy also refer to sort of like moteliers and hoteliers that we might traditionally consider to be more commercial, that isn't less of a house, I guess?
Yeah, I think the issue is that we don't understand what this amendment is actually trying to do, so we can't consider all of those implications at this point. We don't have enough time to do that.
If there are no more questions, I suggest we take, Councillor Chung, and after that question, I think we should take a brief adjournment. I'd like to talk to you, Councillor, about this amendment as well.
I can respond publicly to that, but...
Well, we're not having responses to questions. Councillor Chung.
Okay, I'd like to ask, how difficult would this actually be to actually investigate and enforce? Because I think when we're looking at, say, renting out one room or two rooms in a house and the whole house, how can we actually determine that?
I don't think your question is related to the amendment, Councillor, so I think we can take that offline and you can have a conversation with staff in the break. All right, we're going to take a 10-minute adjournment. As you will see up on the screen, Councillor McNulty has reworded his amendment. Do you want to speak briefly to the new words, Councillor?
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, obviously my ideal is that there's just no sense within the consultation document that the status quo policy is something that we would seek to continue. However, that could create legal issues, and as I alluded to, that Airbnb corporate has been deployed here. It's probably worth us being very safe about the approach. So this is a signalling statement to at least say to Airbnb existing owners that the current settings, where every piece of short-term accommodation is not our preferred option. And it's really probably the strongest statement we can send while still being in the legal paddle. So it probably still means some we'll have people coming in through the consultation process nervous about the changes. My hope was to sort of quelch that nervousness, but I see that it's probably not quite achievable. So this feels about that middle ground of sending a strong signal that we want to move to a better policy option, but that we have to keep things open mind.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor?
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Do you wish to speak now, Councillor Abdurrahman? Is there any debate? There appears to be none. We will go to the vote on this amendment. That is carried. We are now going to get lunch. And sorry about the short-term nature of that. And we will come back at 12:45. 1:45. So 12:45. All right. Thank you. And we will return to debate on the substantive. And I have Councillor Brown next, and I will take a speaking order. I don't have anybody else on there at this point. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Actually, I don't really wish to talk so much about the sort of what you think I'm likely to talk about. I just wanted to talk about one of the submissions that we received during the public participation section, and it was to refute some claims made about the lack of consultation between Eastern Ward councillors and the community in respect of the Watts Peninsula project, if we can call it that, Mata Moana. I have actually, along with Councillor Young, have met with the relevant minister and discussed it with him. I've met with the iwi on several occasions and discussed it with Kara Poketapu Dentist, as well as, of course, with Holden. I've met large numbers of the community. I've met the chief executive and the board of the BID in the eastern suburbs, and with the one in Kilburnie, Rogatai, Lyle Bay. So I think it's something which actually has been very widely canvassed and very widely understood. And so far as I can gather from all of those interactions, not one single person has ever voiced any opposition to what is currently planned by council in terms of the joint management of the Mata Moana area for a heritage park that would be of benefit to the community. And so I really would like, just to put it on the record, that I really refute the assertions made in that public submission, because I think they're totally inaccurate and very unfair, both to the community and also to the Eastern Ward councillors. And I'm sure that Sarah and Councillor O'Neill would both endorse my position on this one. So I'd just like to record that opposition to what we heard earlier. Thank you.
Is there any further debate? There appears to be none. All right, we will go to vote. We probably do need to take item 3 separately for Pauiwi Kelly, because that's the one you won't be voting on. Is there anything else that people want to take separately? Yes. All right. So shall we do 3 first and then we do everything else? Oh my goodness, this is far too easy. Oh yeah. No, that's later. All right. So we'll vote on 3. So Liz, if you want to sit back from the table. Three and 3.2. Sorry. That is carried unanimously. And now we will do all of the other items. Yeah, are you noting this, Councillor Brown? The way to get good voting outcomes is to allow people to have breaks and eat food. Councillor Calvert? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. All right, we will now move on to item 2.2. Well, you're getting my attention. The decision register updates and upcoming reports. Oh, the T-shirt says you're introducing the report now. This is exciting. This is an exciting development.
Just to take it as read.
Are there any questions of Councillor McNulty?
Just in terms of uploading to the voting record, I'm interested how that's working and what timelines we should sort of expect from decisions after today's meeting, just as a going forward.
So we normally intend to upload the minutes within a day or 2 of the meeting, and then we've got an internal KPI in our team to then aim to have the voting data up associated with that within about 3 days of the minutes being published.
Cool, thank you.
All right, I will move the report. Councillor Panovich will second. Is there any debate? There appears to be none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Randall.
I just want to note for the record, looking at the forward program, again, my ongoing concern that really it's not very understandable. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. And if you didn't really understand what the council's actual program was in terms of acronyms and words, then you really couldn't understand what's coming towards us. So I just want to know that for record and ask officers to really please try and be clearer in doing things like expand out the acronyms that we use and things like that. Thank you.
All right, we will go to the vote. That is carried. We will now close this meeting, and I will swap places with the mayor.
Can we just have 10-minute adjournment?
Oh yeah, we're going to take another brief adjournment. Yeah, just so we can redo the live stream, etc.
Point 1, I'm reordering the agenda so that we can do the committee reports first. So I bring you to number 3, report of the long-term plan. We'll take it as read. Do we have any questions? I will move the motion and Councillor Panovich will second. Is there any debate? Nope, let's go to a vote. Councillor Brown is agreeing. 3.2, report of LTP on the 13th of Feb. Take it as read. Any questions? Nope. Councillor Matthews will move. Councillor Panovich will second. Any debate? Nope. Let's go to a vote. And that is passed. Okay, report of Regs Committee meeting on the 27th of Feb. Take it as read. Any questions? Nope. Councillor Free, would you like to speak?
No.
Right. Councillor McNulty will second. Any debate? Nope. Let's go to a vote. Fabulous. Now, general business appointments to the Ethnic Communities Advisory Group. I will take the report as read. I will be moving the paper with Councillor Abdurrahman as the nominated rep and Councillor Chung as the alternative. Any questions? Nope. Is there a seconder? Councillor Randall, any debate? Nope. Let's go to a vote. And that is carried. 2.2, decision register updates, upcoming reports. I'll take it as read. Any questions? Nope. I will move it and Deputy Mayor will second. Any debate? Councillor Randall.
And on the basis of also not just complaining but also praising, I just think that just note that this forward program is very clear. The item on there is all spelled out and I know what's coming. Excellent. So good on, guys. Thank you.
Fabulous. And on that positive note, let's go to a vote. And that is carried. Wonderful. I declare the meeting closed. Please join me in a karakia. Unuhia, 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 ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia māma, te nāko, te tinana, te wairoa, te ara takatū, koe rā e rongo, kairia ake ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā, ko wātia.